Beauty biases, so the way you look affects how you are treated by others in society, is a very interesting topic, and it's something I haven't really covered in the fullest depth on this channel, at least not yet. One book that I recommend that you should all read is called The Beauty Bias by Deborah L. Road. I've mentioned this before, and it basically goes over all the way your looks affect the way your life is. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about a couple of cognitive illusions, that's what the book is also called, in how our processing, our functional processing of the way we see the world is influenced by, basically can be tricked by illusions. And so that's going to be the subject of this video. The links to both of these books are in the description. I suggest you take a look at either of them. Number one is called conjunction fallacy. So take this example. Linda is a 31-year-old, single, outspoken, and very bright woman. At university, she studied philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Now, which is the most likely probability? A. Linda is active in the feminist movement. B. Linda is a bank teller. Or C. Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. According to Tversky and Kahneman's study, which first identified this type of bias, most of us would choose C, even though the probability of C, which is a combination of A and B, must be mathematically lower than the individual options by themselves. It may be logical to think that more detail equals a better answer, but that's exactly why it's a fallacy, an error in our judgment. For aesthetics, we can say something like, oh, I like this frame, like a painting frame, which may imply that you don't actually like the painting itself. Or you can say, you're not ugly, I like your hair, which may imply that you don't like the face and are picking another feature to comment on. If I were to say the answer is B, that Linda is a bank teller, then your logical question would be, is she not a feminist? Given her description, that's the only natural cause of questioning. The biggest problem here is that we overestimate certain probabilities together due to societal biases. When it comes to homicide cases, participants tied the word young with male with black as being 27% more likely than other attributes, despite no other information being available. AI and language models do have the same challenge, and they do the same thing because those words are so commonly put close together in text. The second is called base rate neglect. Imagine you're looking for a car. You have a small budget and you have to choose between a Maud and a Nissan to avoid copyright names. They're almost identical, except last week you read a consumer article explaining how Nissan owners are having trouble with their cars out of a sample size of 10,000, and you should probably buy the Maud. Your uncle tells you that his Nissan works fine and he feels like it's a more reliable car. Most people, when tested by Fong and colleagues, choose their uncle's opinion over a professional consumer report. Their uncle is closer in proximity to them, and so his advice must be more personalized. Surely? No, not quite. This is the exact problem I see in my own YouTube comment section. Despite thousands of articles and research papers at this point, naysayers of whatever topic I'm discussing, even this video, will still go with their own experiences or those of a close relative, missing the bigger picture. Yeah, but what about XYZ dating XYZ, checkmate, Coos, ha, got you, that kind of thing. And similarly, people often listen to their relatives' opinions, in this example on physical beauty, over more established guidelines or books, or what general society, the consensus of general society might be. Your parents may suggest a respectable haircut that worked great in the 80s, and you're going to go with it, not realizing that it doesn't fit your face shape or your aesthetic, despite tons of research literature, online guides, and even similar stories on Reddit telling you that's a bad idea. That is base rate neglect, where we don't weight probabilities properly. Another example to drill the point home, 995 nurses and 5 doctors are in a sample. Paul is randomly chosen. He's 35 years old, lives in a posh neighborhood in a beautiful house. Is Paul more likely to be a doctor or a nurse? Now, despite the insane likelihood of being a nurse, the odds are 995 to 5. Pennycook and Thompson found most people would say that he is a doctor. That's not logical thinking, and we often ignore logic to do what intuitively feels right. But the problem is, our feelings are often very inaccurate. Kahneman 1973 explains this by saying that rather than evaluating the probability logically, which is a very mentally exhausting, it's a taxing task, it's easier to go with the option that is more representative and thus faster. It's like saying, I've met doctors and they're typically wealthy, so the answer must be that Paul is a doctor. which is untrue in this sample because the probabilities are not in his favor. The third is called framing. The way things are worded has a significant effect on how you perceive it. If the outcome of two options are the same, the way they are worded should not affect how you decide, but they do. For example, is this video half over or is it just half beginning? There are 3 ways to frame things that most salesmen know. Actually, notice that I said salesman and not saleswomen, and now someone in the comment section may wrongly assume that I'm a misogynist. Whether I said salesmen or saleswomen, you would still understand exactly what I'm talking about, but the better way to frame that might be salespeople, so that no one has the right to be offended. That is an example of attribute framing. The choice of words influences your perceptions of me, and often I have to be very careful with how I present things. Goal framing is rewording something to speak only about the positive benefits of a product or an action rather than the negatives. When you describe the consequences of something, such as the negatives of being unattractive, people take it more seriously than talking about the benefits of being attractive, where comments would say something like, "Who cares?" What you believe doesn't actually change the end outcome of how life works, but I can do my part in making you understand why physical beauty is an important part of life. So to get a message across, I often have to focus on the negatives in these videos, not because I really want to, but because it's more effective messaging. With risky choice framing, the third type of framing, Tversky found that depending on whether you're positively or negatively framed to the question, you're more likely to take risks. For example, saving 200 people for sure in a scenario versus risking 600 people but potentially saving up to 400. In a world that's now more divisive than ever, I think all of you should be really paying attention to how the information you consume, especially on social media, is framed. Fourth is confirmation bias. Depending on one's worldview, it is likely that they're going to seek out only arguments that support it. I believe that beauty is not 100% in the eye of the beholder. That is my worldview based on all the things I've seen. There are some that believe that it is purely in the eye of the beholder. Both of us may be susceptible to confirmation bias, and so we both believe our views strongly. It happens to researchers all the time. One group agrees with the hypothesis, the other disagrees, and for decades nothing ever gets solved because they each find new arguments to support them. In technical terms, people don't care about finding the truth, they care about being right, and the real name for this type of bias is actually my side bias, which was coined by Perkins in 1989. Edward and Smith explains that when people consider a thought that they disagree with, they are biased towards falsification. They find exceptions, counter-arguments, counter-examples. Participants were more likely to strongly refute something they disagree with than support something they agree with. So it's not about finding the truth, it's about ego. The best way to avoid this is by considering both sides and staying open-minded. In my previous video on masculine faces, I wanted to believe that the title was truth, but at the end of the video, there was not enough conclusive evidence to prove that exact question, and so the views had to change. Detaching yourself from the argument can help both sides get to the truth faster, rather than always trying to find exceptions to anything that's ever said because of my side bias. The final point is called illusory correlations. Generally, as humans, we can make reliable correlations. Something is glowing red, chances are that it's going to be hot to touch. But under suboptimal conditions, our decision-making greatly breaks down, and this is very strongly repeatable and consistent across most people. Seeing things that are not there is called an illusory correlation, and we all do this quite a lot, like linking a doctor with the word helpful or an accountant with the word perfectionist. It's theorized we do this because we give more weight to what we can see than what we cannot see. I can tell whether a face in front of me is beautiful or not, but understanding what makes a face beautiful is a more abstract idea that cannot be seen, and so this requires energy to think about. If I find faces that are sharp with sharp cheekbones attractive, it's logical to think that that must be my type. Being unaware or not spending the time to ask, why is this actually the case? What societal, biological, or parental upbringings caused me to think this way? I see this comment a lot. Who cares, or why does any of this matter? On a lot of the beauty related videos, the topic of aesthetics is just one vehicle. It's an idea to discuss more complex concepts of why we are the way we are, the biology and biases that shapes our worldviews. It matters because it's you learning more about yourself. So let's leave it at that for part 1. All of these biases come from a book I recently finished called Cognitive Illusions by Rudiger Voll. The link is in the description, and I do highly recommend it. As always, if you want your face looked at free from these biases, then order an aesthetics assessment from our team and get feedback from our doctors. If you have TikTok, you should also follow us there. I'm also starting a new channel soon on Skinstreak, which is our second company, and that's more skincare related because there's a lot to talk about in that section as well, using the same Koobs style.